At the close of each sermon, we stand and sing a song. That's been called a song of invitation, a song of encouragement, a song of inspiration. That song is to give anyone an opportunity to ask for prayers, to make known that they would like to become a member of this congregation, to request baptism, whatever spiritual need there might be. And so as we sing that song at the close of our message, if we can assist you in any way, we encourage you to respond. David A. Slagle from Lawrenceville, Georgia, tells a wild story about an experience he had. I served as a nurse in the operating room for several years. One day, a couple arrived, both with gunshot wounds. He had awakened late for his first day on the job because his wife did not set the alarm. He expressed his displeasure by shooting her in the arm. Not to be outdone, she retreated to another room, got a shotgun, and shot him in the arm. As I gathered their paperwork in the preoperative unit, I heard something one would only expect to hear in a country song. Separated by a deputy sheriff and handcuffed to their respective stretchers, the husband began, "I love you, baby, and I'm sorry I shot you." The wife responded, "I love you too, baby, and I'm sorry I shot you." Two little brothers, Harry and James, had finished supper and were playing until bedtime. Somehow, Harry hit James with a stick, and tears and bitter words followed. Charges and accusations were still being exchanged as their mother prepared them for bed. She said, "Now, boys, what would happen if either of you died tonight and you never had the opportunity again to forgive one another?" James spoke up. "Well, okay, I'll forgive him tonight. But if we're both alive in the morning, you'd better look out." In Dadeville, Alabama, a man shot and killed another man because he was better at quoting the Bible. They were arguing over a subject, and one man became so jealous and angry because he couldn't keep up quoting scriptures with the other man, he shot and killed him. There seems to be an epidemic of anger these days. If we add a D to anger, we have the word danger. We are in a dangerous situation if we have anger stored up in our hearts. This morning we began a series of several messages taken from the Sermon on the Mount. We have 6 contrasts that Jesus gives, and this is the first of those contrasts. Read with me from Matthew chapter 5, beginning with verse 21. "You have heard that it was said to those of old, 'You shall not murder,' and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment, and whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says 'you fool' will be liable to the hell of fire. So if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are going with him to court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you be put in prison. Truly I say to you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny." Jesus has begun the Sermon on the Mount, by giving the Beatitudes, by telling his hearers, the disciples particularly, that they are salt and light in the world. They have influence for good. He has said that he came not to destroy the law, but to fulfill the law, which he did. And now he gives 6 contrasts. And the first of these has to do with our thoughts and our words. Now, Jesus says, "You have heard that it was said to those of old, 'You shall not murder.'" Jack Lewis makes the point, the contrasts are to be understood as intensifications of the law and not as antitheses to it set forth by a new Moses. None annuls the demands of the law. Jesus set forth no conflict with the law, but a deepening and completion of it. What the people had heard was, yes, from the law of Moses, but it didn't give the full sense of the law. So Jesus here says, you heard it said, you shall not murder. Whoever murders will be liable to judgment. The Ten Commandments included the command, you shall not murder. There were penalties for murder. But notice that Jesus says, but I say to you, that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Jesus first speaks about angry thoughts. Now, not all anger is wrong. There is righteous anger. William Evans observed, a man who is incapable of being angry at sin is at the same time incapable of having a real love for righteousness. We must be angry with sin. William Barclay says of the anger that Jesus speaks of here, it is the long-lived anger. It is the anger of the man who nurses his wrath to keep it warm. It is the anger over which a person broods and which he will not allow to die. It is the anger which will not forget, the anger which refuses to be pacified, the anger which seeks revenge. Jesus went behind the sin of murder to the attitude of heart that can result in murder. That which leads to sin may very well be sinful. Larry Chenard observed, the surpassing righteousness which Jesus opposed extends to every thought and action that is destructive of the bond that unites people under the reign of God. Angry thoughts and insulting words may not lead to actual murder. However, in God's sight, they are the same as murder. We read in 1 John chapter 3, verse 15, anyone who hates his brother is a murderer, and you know that no murderer has eternal life in him. This has been called thought murder. It is dangerous to think or say, I wish you were dead. There are eternal consequences for anger and insult. You've no doubt heard this, sow a thought, and you reap an act. Sow an act, and you reap a habit. Sow a habit, and you reap a character. Sow a character, and you reap a destiny. Jesus first addresses angry thoughts, and then he talks about angry words. He says here about what you say. Everyone who is angry with his brother, he first says, but then he addresses calling people names. The first of those in your translation may be raka. That word means good for nothing, empty-headed, idiot. It is a word of utter contempt. And the second word, translated sometimes fool, means moron, morally worthless. A.B. Bruce says, raka expresses contempt for a man's head. Says you're stupid. Ore expresses contempt for his heart and character. You're a scoundrel. A more serious reproach than raka. The latter scorns a man's mind and calls him stupid. Moros scorns his heart and character. But Jesus has said, when you use such kinds of words, you are carrying out your angry thoughts with words that in essence murder. Frank L. Cox said, if having anger and hatred in the heart is thought murder, speaking to another in an insulting fashion is tongue murder. R.V.G. Tasker observed, the man who tells his brother that he is doomed to hell is in danger of hell himself. We see an increasing intensity in the text, moving from a local court to the Sanhedrin. Jesus is saying, if you say this word, you could come before the court. If You say this other word, you come before a higher court. The implication is that expressing anger has more serious consequences than feeling anger. In his book, The Power Zone, Dr. Larry Calvin wrote an article that can help us understand that words can damage people. He wrote several years ago, a young lady walked into my counseling center. She was under 25 years old, 5 foot 2 inches, and weighed well under 100 pounds. When she was asked to describe herself, every word she used was a fat word. While we were thinking she needed intravenous feeding, she was seeing herself as fat. Her daily diet was 3 grapes and a teaspoonful of grape nuts. And after eating that, she felt bloated. In the process of treating her, we learned of the verbal abuse she endured as a child. She recalled one incident that occurred when she was about 11 years old. She had sneaked off one Saturday to go to the mall to meet a boy her age. They'd had a Coke and walked around holding hands in the mall, looking in store windows. Her brother had ratted on her. So when she got home, her father started yelling at her. Among other things, her dad said that day was one sentence she has never forgotten. Her dad said, "I don't see what the boys see in you anyway, as fat as you are." Every time she looks in the mirror, she hears that sentence and sees a fat nobody. The boy once asked his father, "Dad, how do wars begin?" The father replied, "Well, son, take World War I, for instance. It all started when Germany invaded Belgium. Immediately, his wife interrupted. That's not how it happened. It began when that Archduke was murdered." The husband scowled and snapped back, "Are you answering the question, or am I?" Turning with a huff, the wife stormed from the room, slamming the door on her way out. When the dishes finally stopped rattling in the cupboard, an uneasy silence followed. After a moment, the silence was broken by the boy who said, "Dad, you don't have to tell me anymore. I know now." George W. Martin tells the following true story. "I remember a fellow who once wrote a nasty letter to his father. Since we worked in the same office, I advised him not to send it because it was written in a fit of temper. But he sealed it and asked me to put it in the mail. Instead, I simply slipped it into my pocket and kept it until the next day. The following morning, he arrived in the office looking very worried. 'George,' he said, 'I wish I had never sent that note to my dad yesterday. It hurts me deeply, and I know it will break his heart when he reads it. I'd give $50 to get it back.' Taking the envelope from my pocket, I handed it to him and told him what I had done. He was so overjoyed that he actually wanted to pay me the $50. David Roper says, Jesus was saying that in the heavenly court, one is guilty not only if he murders a brother, but also if he is angry with a brother. Jesus then follows with instruction that if we have a problem with a brother or a sister, there's a need for speedy reconciliation. He gives 2 illustrations, one with a brother, one with an enemy. The key word here is quickly. If you have a problem with someone, if they've wronged you or they think you've wronged them, whatever the case may be reconciled quickly. You know, that's the opposite of what we usually do. There is a big difference in trying to get rid of a tree sapling and a full-grown tree. If you see a tree that you don't want in your yard starting to grow, you better get it pulled up then. The longer it grows, the harder it's going to be to get out of the ground. On our text, John Stott said, "Yet how seldom do we heed Christ's call for immediacy of action. If murder is a horrible crime, malicious anger and insult are horrible too. and so is every deed, word, look, or thought by which we hurt or offend a fellow human being. We need to be more sensitive about these evils. When Leonardo da Vinci was painting The Last Supper, he had an intense, bitter argument with a fellow painter. Leonardo was so enraged that he decided to paint the face of his enemy into the face of Judas. That way, the hated painter's face would be preserved for ages in the face of the betraying disciple. When Leonardo finished Judas, everyone easily recognized the face of the painter with whom Leonardo quarreled. Leonardo continued to work on the painting, but as much as he tried, he could not paint the face of Christ. Something was holding him back. Leonardo decided his hatred toward his fellow painter was the problem. So he worked through his hatred by repainting Judas's face, replacing the image of his fellow painter with another face. Only then was he able to paint Jesus' face and complete the masterpiece. If we can help you in any way, won't you come?